Chapter 1. The Weight of the Trees. They say the Appalachian Mountains are older than bones. If you ask a geologist, they will show you core samples and isotopic data. They will tell you with absolute clinical certainty that these ridges formed roughly 480 million years ago, long before the first dinosaur took a breath. They will tell you it is just a matter of tectonic plates crashing together in the dark of deep time. But the people who actually live out here, the ones whose families have sat on the same sagging front porches for 5 generations, they know better. They look up at the tree line when the sun goes down, and they know the truth. These mountains are not just a collection of ancient rock and dead dirt. They are alive. They possess a memory. And it is a memory that predates the first human footprint. A memory that does not include us and does not want us here. Out here in the deep backcountry, the trees do not grow like normal forests. The hemlocks and ancient oaks grow incredibly thick, their trunks twisting and wrapping around each other like gnarly arthritic fingers. They lean inward, creating a dense, suffocating canopy that blocks out the sky, turning midday into a permanent murky twilight. It feels as though they are actively huddling together, conspiring to hide something on the forest floor from the eyes of God. And if you plan to walk under them, there are rules. These are not the safety guidelines you will find printed on a glossy national park visitor's brochure. These are the rules whispered over wood stoves and hunting campfires. Rule number 1. If you are walking through the deep woods, miles from the nearest trail, and you clearly hear your own name called from the thicket, no, you didn't. You do not stop. You do not turn around. You do not answer. Rule number 2. If you are setting up camp and your flashlight beam catches a tall, impossibly thin figure standing perfectly still just beyond the reach of the light, no, you didn't. You lower your beam and you pretend it was just a dead tree. And rule number 3, the most important one. Never, under any circumstances, look up into the canopy after the sun goes down. Because out here, something is always looking back down at you. My name is Samuel Cochrane. For 15 years of my adult life, I proudly wore the badge of National Park Search and Rescue. I was the man they called when a seasoned hiker vanished off the Appalachian Trail, or when a child wandered away from a family campsite in the Great Smoky Mountains. I was a man built entirely on logic. I believed in the science of survival. I believed in footprints pressed into the mud, snapped twigs, compass bearings, and infrared heat signatures. I believed that every single disappearance, no matter how strange it seemed to the public, had a rational, earthly explanation. People get turned around. They succumb to hypothermia. They fall into hidden ravines, or they cross paths with a hungry black bear. The math of the wild is brutal, but I believed it was always math. But my logic, my faith in the natural order of the world, died 20 years ago. It was July 12, 1994, Blackwater Ridge. The summer heat was oppressive that year. The air in the forest was so thick with humidity, it felt like breathing through a warm, wet towel. I was off duty, taking a weekend hike with my younger brother, Toby. Toby was 8 years old. He was a bright, endlessly energetic kid. He was wearing a slightly oversized denim jacket, a pair of scuffed sneakers, and a bright, highly saturated red child's backpack. I remember he had a small, cheap yellow plastic whistle tied to the strap of that backpack. I had bought it for him at a county fair just 2 days prior. He was walking right behind me, no more than 6 feet away, humming a catchy country song he had heard on my truck's radio during the drive-up. The sound of his little boots crunching on the dry leaves and his off-key humming were a constant, comforting presence at my back. We reached a slight incline near the 3-mile marker of the Blackwater Trail. The heat was making me sweat through my shirt, and I realized we hadn't seen a trail marker in over 30 minutes. Something felt off. It took me a moment to realize what it was. The forest had gone completely silent. The constant droning buzz of the summer cicadas had stopped instantly. There was no wind rustling the leaves. Even the birds had gone quiet. I stopped walking. I reached into my chest pocket and pulled out my topographical map to check our elevation. I turned my head away from Toby for exactly 10 seconds. I counted them later in my nightmares. 10 seconds to unfold the paper, trace my finger along the contour lines, and fold it back up. In those 10 seconds, I did not hear a single unnatural sound. There was no shout of surprise. There was no sound of a struggle, no heavy thud of a body hitting the dirt, no frantic rustling of bushes as if someone was being dragged away. There was only that heavy, suffocating, green silence. "All right, kiddo, we need to take a slight left up ahead," I said, turning back around. The trail was empty. I blinked, assuming he had just stepped behind one of the massive oak trunks to tie his shoe or pick up an interesting rock. "Toby, come on out. It's too hot to play hide and seek." My voice bounced off the dense wood, echoing flatly down the corridor of trees. He didn't answer. Panic is a cold, sharp thing. It starts in your stomach and instantly shoots into your throat. I dropped my pack and ran back down the path. I ran into the thicket, tearing my arms on the briars, screaming his name until my vocal cords bled. Within 3 hours, I had mobilized my entire search and rescue unit. For the next 3 weeks, we tore Blackwater Ridge apart. We had helicopters performing grid searches with thermal cameras. We had over 100 volunteers walking shoulder to shoulder through the brush. We brought in the most elite tracking bloodhounds in the state, but the dogs were the first sign that this was not a normal rescue. When the handlers brought the bloodhounds to the exact spot on the trail where Toby vanished, the dogs completely broke down. These were animals trained to track a scent through rain and mud for miles. But at that specific patch of dirt, they dropped their tails between their legs, pressed their bellies flat to the ground, and began to whimper in absolute terror. No amount of pulling on their leashes could make them walk even 1 foot into the tree line. We found no footprints leading off the trail. We didn't find his red backpack. We didn't find a torn piece of denim or the yellow plastic whistle. Toby didn't just go missing. The mountain didn't just take him. It erased him. I left the service shortly after they officially called off the search. I handed in my badge and my uniform, and I walked away from the woods. I couldn't look at the trees anymore. Every time the wind blew through the branches, it sounded like the forest was whispering, mocking me for turning my back. I spent the next 20 years trying to forget the silence of Blackwater Ridge, but the mountain never forgets a face. And yesterday, it finally sent me a reminder.